Well, good morning, everybody. To start us off today, I want to show you a radar animation just here of the last 12 hours or so of this large and very slow-moving winter storm that is moving through parts of the central United States. And I got asked a great question yesterday while I was in Indiana about the size of this system, and the question was about the comparison between it and a big hurricane. And I said, well, if we take a very large hurricane, like this year we had Hurricane Ian or Hurricane Nicole, you could probably fit about a dozen of those hurricanes inside of the entirety of these large systems. And the reason why is because big extratropical lows like this one or mid-latitude cyclones are highly sheared. So they have multiple components of them, including large upper-level frontal boundaries that tend to stretch off to the east and south. They tend to line up eventually with the surface boundaries like the cold fronts. But on the northern side of it, we just have so much wraparound due to the upper level wind field that it's just a huge system. And as this one went through, it's done quite a bit in terms of damage and being very high impact up to this point. And there's a lot of different ways we can dissect this. But again, this animation goes through this morning where we're still watching very heavy snow and strong winds on the backside, rounds of rain going through the central and eastern Corn Belt, and then very heavy rain, including some storms down here that have been quite nasty over the last 24 hours that are now moving over the Mississippi River and into parts of Mississippi, Alabama, and eventually later today into the rest of the southeast. On the snow side of it, I waited for this map before I recorded because I really wanted to see it. It just updated about 30 seconds ago, and what it shows you is the last 72 hours of total snowfall. So what we've got here is stretching from this part of Colorado into North Dakota. There's been an area in through here, if you just kind of match up the colors, where we've already picked up over 18 inches of snow, but a broad area of 6 to 12 inches of snow, and more is coming into this region. We're also going to see quite a bit of snow added up here in parts of New England as well. On the rainfall side of this, if we just look at total precipitation, again, this was snow, but all of this throughout here was rain. Beneficial rains did come through parts of eastern and central Kansas, Oklahoma, but of course there were some very, very nasty storms in and around Dallas yesterday, multiple reports of tornadoes. I want to point out that some of the rains from this storm have gone through parts of south, but really the southern and eastern part of Arkansas, but into Mississippi and Louisiana, producing between 3 and 6 inches of rainfall. So as these storms continue to progress east, they do have that potential in this region of like Alabama, Georgia, parts of Georgia, but down here in the Panhandle as well. Now, yesterday's storms, just want to point out that there were 18 reports of tornadoes up to this point and also some large hail. And a lot of the storms just blew up right here midday in and around and north of Dallas. But we saw more tornadoes being reported right in through this area, just to kind of make a point that this system has been quite potent. Now, our all hazards weather map today, let's start in that same region. Flood watches out through this entire area. There's also a tornado watch down here till 1 o'clock today. Still blizzard warnings back here in parts of the western and northern plains, with winter storm warnings that stretch all across the northern tier of the United States from Montana into parts of Wisconsin, the UP, and Michigan. Then we're going to watch the storm later this week evolve its way over toward the east coast, where we do have right here in West Virginia and Virginia getting into parts of Pennsylvania an ice storm warning. And then we've already got the winter storm watches that have been issued for parts of Pennsylvania, New York, Vermont, and eventually into New Hampshire as well. So this system's going to be moving eventually in that direction. On the severe weather side of it, just want to point out the Storm Prediction Center has got an enhanced risk down here for Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, and the Panhandle. And then tomorrow this moves into Florida as the front finally moves east and drags its rainfall with it. Let's go look at that on this morning's HighRes NAM model. So we're going to pick up about 8 o'clock this morning. As we just play this forward again, this is where the severe storms are going to be. Round 2 of the heavy rain moves through parts of the Mid-South, Tennessee Valley, Ohio Valley. And there you go. Working our way through tonight and into tomorrow morning. So let's pause this out there about 6 a.m. So this storm system will take, it started on Monday. So it's gone from Monday from here to there. That's how slow moving this storm system is by Thursday morning. And so that's where we're going to continue to watch the stronger winds and snow, heavy snow at times coming in through this area. Now the rains by the time we get into Wednesday night into Thursday morning are pushing through the mid-Atlantic and into the Carolinas. But this is where we're going to watch for some cold air damming up against the mountains to give us the risk of ice. That's what that color represents right into there. So throughout the day on Thursday, this is where we could be seeing a significant ice storm. And then by the time we get to Thursday afternoon and evening, that's when the snow starts to build into northern Pennsylvania and New York. But it's still the backside of this, delivering snow in parts of the Dakotas, the whole of the upper Midwest, and maybe even getting into Iowa and northern Illinois by Thursday evening. So the low, all the way out there by Friday, is still sitting over Wisconsin. That's where this upper level low sits as the main, leading edge of the storm moves through parts of the Northeast. Okay, from here, let's just take a look at the snowfall maps. Again, this is the updated data from the ECMWF. This goes from now until Monday evening. So just kind of looking at the storm total out of this. This is additional snow compared to what we've already had. So the heavy span is going to be in this part of Minnesota and northern Wisconsin, where some places could add another foot to their total snowfall amounts, but still quite a bit more coming on the back side of this. And then as we look into parts of New England, we see here that the interior parts of New York coming from Pennsylvania into Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine, and even parts of Massachusetts. This is pretty far into the interior, but 6 to 10 inches of snow is possible, some places more than that. And we're going to have some lake effect snow that's going to be able to follow this. On the ice storm side of this, just want to point out, I think the greatest risk is going to be here in the Appalachian Mountains between Virginia and West Virginia, getting into this corridor of Pennsylvania and through here. This is the latest probability of at least 1/10 of an inch of ice accumulating, so please be on the lookout in this area. Okay, some of the changes we've seen in the latest model data. The larger ridge that was over the west seems to be flattening a bit in the forecast for the end of this year. And we've now seen the models increase the likelihood of bringing in better moisture in through a corridor here. Could be a bit drier north and a bit drier south, but there's a system I'm watching as we approach the week of Christmas that could be coming into this area that we're going to have to take a close look at here in a few moments. But other than that, we do not see wetter conditions for parts of the central United States or the southwest, and these are areas we've been watching very carefully in terms of their drought potential. But again, this is a 10-day precipitation anomaly map. All right, let's go look at the two big models we like to examine, the GFS on the left and the European on the right. We'll pick it up here Friday midday. So this is as the low is kind of occluding and sitting here over parts of Wisconsin and Michigan with the leading edge of the storm, like the main frontal boundary pushing through parts of New England. Okay, so we work our way from Friday into Saturday. Scattered snow on the backside, lake effect gets going. And what I'm going to be watching at this point is going to be our next system. There's actually two of them going on. A weak one coming into the Pacific Northwest. And then on Monday, later on Monday, we're going to watch for a system to emerge in parts of Texas. So there's higher pressure here, and around the back side of it, we're going to feed some moisture into this one. And this system has evolved a lot in the model runs over this week. At one point, it was a much larger central United States system, but given the change in the depth of this high pressure that's ahead of it, it now seems to be a bit more suppressed and farther to the south. So I'm saying next Monday, especially Monday evening, we're going to watch out for some storms in this area from eastern Texas into parts of Louisiana, then getting down toward the Gulf Coast. Now, one of the bigger changes in the models is this new system that both the ECMWF and the European are kind of hinting at next Tuesday. It's about 6 days from now. And that particular system may push across the United States ahead of a very significant shot of colder air that's going to be coming through. And the models are a bit unsure with what to do with that current wave. It's still sitting today way off in the Pacific Ocean, so that's why we don't have much information on it. But you can see that next Tuesday into Wednesday, that's kind of what I'm rocking over here. We're going to watch for this system to possibly emerge out of the northern Rockies here and into the upper Midwest and northern plains. The models have a different solution on it. You can see one just pulls out a larger cyclone that stretches from Ontario all the way down to down here into the Mid-South, whereas the GFS has just got some snow out ahead of a very strong Arctic high that's going to be pulling through. And I got to tell you about that Arctic high here. But what I want to illustrate is that during that time period, what we're seeing is the evolution of this trough. So watch. Starts here. That's when it enters the Pacific Northwest, and then it dives into the Midwest. So that is just a couple of days before Christmas. That deep cold air is trapped in that trough. And anytime we see flow doing this, it indicates the risk for a storm system to kind of curl up here or move out of the Midwest toward the East Coast, or even something to show up on the Gulf Coast and roll up like this. So I stress that because our week 2 model forecasts, because this is out there a couple days before Christmas, they're not yet fully reflecting that system. So they see it coming in and then the trough forming, but how does it move from there? Does it do something like this, or does it actually come up the East Coast? I just want to make a point that we'll watch this carefully through the next several days to see how that week 2 forecast eventually evolves. All right. One thing we do know is that during this time, very cold air is going to move across the country. So let's go have a talk about that. Here's today's high temperatures. There's the large warm sector out ahead of the upper level front. And this is what's going to help destabilize the atmosphere here. Still have that northeast flow giving us that backdoor cold front. But watch the temperatures change later this week. It is important to note that inside of this system producing all of this heavy snow, our temperatures are not brutally cold yet in this area. They're cold enough for the snow, of course, but not so cold as to give us very high liquid to snow ratios. That cold air starts to show up as we approach the weekend. High temperatures on Saturday will struggle to get out of the single digits in parts of North Dakota. And then as we go forward, watch this Sunday into Monday and Tuesday of next week. We're talking high temperatures below zero in through this area. And then as we step out there into that last week of the year, NOAA released this yesterday, and it is their forecast for the risk of hazardous temperatures going into the 21st through the 27th. And that echoes what most major modeling centers have been saying. We've kind of been talking about this for a while, that the colder air is going to be let out of the Canadian prairie, and it appears that we could be up to 20 degrees colder than normal for a while here as we approach Christmas and even follow it. And the main point behind showing you this is that whenever you deliver this much cold air, there will be a much invigorated jet stream flow. It's just strong contrast in temperatures. So I do not think that the end of 2022 is going to finish on a quiet note by any stretch, given what we see the pattern setting up like. We're going to cover that in a whole lot more detail in tomorrow night's in-depth forecast, as I see a little bit more data suggesting how the end of this month and beginning of January is going to start. But one thing that has been clear in the models is actually in the southern hemisphere. And that is that over the next 10 days, the risk of being drier in southern Brazil, Paraguay, Uruguay, and Argentina has continued to stay high, while heavy rains hit parts of northern and central growing regions in Brazil. This will likely push yields way up in this area. This is not necessarily going to be a major stress for Mato Grosso do Sul over toward Sao Paulo or Paraná, but into Rio Grande do Sul, Paraguay, Uruguay, and Argentina, this is going to continue to put stress on an already drought-stricken region. And you can see the temperatures during that time may be 2 to 5 degrees Celsius above normal, meaning that as they officially start summer, it's going to be hot and dry, which is not going to do well for the crops in those areas. So that's another ongoing story we're going to have to keep a very close eye on. I look forward to reporting back to you again tomorrow about it. Until then, have a good rest of your day. Thanks.